Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. A very special thank you to Lisa Godley and Victor Bowen and Todd Washburn for keeping things going while I was on vacation. Now, I'm going to have to admit it was really tough for me to stay away with everything that's happened over the past week or so, but rest is necessary if one is to be at their very best. I'm so very happy to be back. A program note right off the top. Tonight on WHRO TV 15, tune in at 9 for America in Black and Blue, a PBS NewsHour weekend special. This show will address the police-involved killings of Philando Castile in Minnesota and Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and the 5 officers gunned down by a sniper in Dallas. The discussion is about the interaction between police and communities of color. That's tonight at 9 on WHRO TV 15. And I also have to say how very proud I am to be a resident of Norfolk. Wednesday's Silent Mile March was powerful, moving, and awe-inspiring. It was fantastic seeing so many people come together from all walks of life to honor those who have been killed and to stand together in solidarity. Congratulations to the organizers, Mia Bird, Kat Martin, Janelle Birchfield, Tommy Coleman, and all the others who made it happen. And Victor, can we take the music out now? Thank you. And, you know, as I listened to all of the news reports and watched the coverage of memorial services and monitored social media, my first instinct for today's show was to completely revamp the show and bring in experts from police and social science fields and so forth to help us make sense of what's happening in our country today. But at the same time, I was reading a new book called Soul Sisters, Devotions for and from African American, Latina, and Asian Women. And it settled in my soul that the conversation we are about to have is exactly what we need, a message of hope and healing from the perspective of women. My guest today is Dr. Suzan Johnson Cook, former U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom and the author of Soul Sisters. Welcome, Ambassador Sujay. How are you? You know, and I was very excited because when I was reading your background and I knew that you had had all of these experiences, and as I thought about what was going on, and it feels like this week, you know, people are just trying to take a breath and trying to say, we just need some peace. So I wonder from your perspective, what are you thinking about and as you observed the happenings from the last couple of weeks? And now we even have Nice, France today. So there's a lot of violence going on. I'd love to hear your take on it.
You know, and as ambassador under the Obama administration for international religious freedom, my role was to go all over the world and advocate basically for peace, so people could have the opportunity to believe as they pleased and not be in the midst of violence. But there was a whole lot of violence going on, and I always was saying to myself as I went around the world, I'm needed in the United States as well. You know, we have a whole lot that's going on. And I said what America needs to deal with, when I came back, I wrote this article for Huffington Post, and I said the new 3 R's. America needs to deal with race, religion, and respect for women, because those are the areas that we've neglected. And so I went and fought religious wars. Here we're fighting racial wars. And it's really, really tough, you know. And ISIS is showing its ugly head, but it was beginning to reveal itself when I was on the road. And so we see kind of violence all over the world. And I know that women usually have not been at the table, have not had their voices amplified. And so one of the things I did, in addition to writing this book, I came back and I created an organization called Pro Voice, Pro Boss. Bringing Black and Latino women leaders together, because so often in our communities we were the voices that were silent, although we were the ones who were praying for our children, praying for our husbands, praying for, you know, particularly sons. I'm a mother of 2 sons, And, every day they go out, I'm covering them in prayer. There's young men now, 21 and 24, and everybody talks about the talk, that we have to have with our sons particularly about how if a police person stops you or if you're in a store. But I call it the talk, the cry, and the prayer, because every black mother that I know, has the talk certainly with our sons and daughters now, but then we have a cry because we know a call is coming at some point, either from our children or from law enforcement, and then it's the prayer as they go out to live what's hopefully a normal life, but we know that there's always another layer, another cloud over them. And so it's a rough place to be, but it's creating what we call a new normalcy. So how do we get to the other side of this, the other side of the violence? And so it's creating a new normalcy.
And that's scary in that sense, although we've got to figure out a way to work through it. I'm wondering, during your time as a chaplain with NYPD, the conversations that you had with police officers about what they face and how they deal with issues, particularly from minority communities, and you being an African-American mother, and how did that come together? I mean, what kinds of conversations did you have about that? Because I'm sure you had to be curious from their perspective in terms of the stop, the talk, and so forth.
Exactly. I actually came into law enforcement in a wonderful era. Lee P. Brown, who later became mayor of Houston and commissioner of Atlanta Police, was the commissioner when I became chaplain, and David Dinkins was mayor. And there were actually some wonderful people in law enforcement that I began with. And so one of the things I want to lift up is just as the young female officer was on YouTube and social media saying, I try to do a good job. I want to lift up the officers who do a good job. And so we don't want to be afraid of those who protect us. And, I want to have police officers to call when there's time of trouble. So I want to lift up both black and white that really were good. But Lee Brown introduced what was called community policing, and that's what they're talking about now. They went away from it. But it was basically having officers who were from and familiar with communities being the ones who actually policed our communities, because then you would not have the fear, of our own. You would not have the so-called mistakes of killing people that you thought were going to attack you. And so we have to come back to community policing. So a lot of my conversations were actually encouragement and actually, prayers for protection as they went out to police our streets. But there also was the hint of racism that many endured because, say, an officer got shot in the line of duty and he was white, or she, was co-ed now, and then a black officer, same injury, same line of duty injury, and they would not get the same amount of pay. So one would get 3/4, one would only get half. And so those kinds of things were things we talked about regularly. And so to be able to have the access to the hierarchy, the higher-ups, was important to have someone at the table who could be the go-between between the community and the police commissioner. When people were killed, like I came in during the Amadou Diallo case, when he was shot reaching for the wallet, and again having to deal with I'm part of the community. It's not like I'm different. So being a bridge builder, making sure that there were voices from the community that were carried to the police department and vice versa. As a result, I became a very good friend, and she's one of my closest friends of Amadou's mother. Her name is Kadi Diallo. Because, I was a mother, and she was a mother who had lost her son. And so you connect on a compassionate heart place, that has nothing to do with law enforcement. This is a mother who's lost her son. So it was those kinds of experiences, having a woman at the table, that made a difference. The 9/11 operators, mostly black women, who were on the phones with people as they were being killed or incinerated, really, at the World Trade Center when that whole bombing went down. Those were the women who called for me, the female chaplain, to come and pray with them, because it was trauma. You're on the phone with one person in a minute trying to get help, and the next minute you hear them screaming and being burned up. And it was a whole kind of what was post-traumatic stress. Many didn't even come back to work, but the person they called for was the female chaplain to come over and help them through this. And, it's not done in a day. It's not done in a week. I mean, we were talking about 6 months of going through it and trying to create a new normalcy. But tragedy has its, effects, and you can't ignore them. And one of the things we had not introduced in our community was therapy, because everybody was afraid to talk about mental health illness. But it is an illness, and people need to be able to have the resources to talk to someone, walk with someone, until they get back to some stabilization. So those were the kind of conversations I had and continue to have. And they're confidential, of course, and that's what people want to know, that it's not going to be on their record, it's not going to show up somewhere, but that they can really talk to and through their situation.
So, Ambassador Sujay, you wrote Soul Sisters. It is a compilation of many different women's voices, but there's a common thread throughout, and that is faith. I'd love for you to talk about why you put this book together and what it means to you.
Well, Soul Sisters is just that we connected at the soul. These are women, black women, Asian women, white women, black, Asian, and Latino women who've been on a journey together as mothers, as sisters, as daughters. About 25 years ago, I wrote a book which was called, for Judson Press, which was a similar book in terms of becoming a black woman, and it was, sister to sister was black women talking to black women. As we evolve, the world is certainly multicultural, and so we were women who talk with each other, who have sister circles, with each other, and the common thread was faith, and so we had chapters that dealt with love, laughter, living, loss, letters to our sons, letters to our daughters, aging, all the things that we go through, and how do you get through it? And the faith was the common perspective. How do we get through it? We tap into our faith. And so I wrote letters to my sons, of course, as a mother of sons, in terms of the things I just described. You want to release them in love, but you also want to protect them. And, you can't, it's like the mother eagle. You can't hold on to them. You've got to let them fly. But at the same time, you have to learn how to mother and not smother. And, so my guys, when they're home for the holidays, are like, Mom, every time I come out of the room, you can't hug me. I was just going to the bathroom, Mom. I was just going to get a piece of bread. Could you just kind of let me? So I had to kind of still not laugh about it, but I still have to put myself in check many days. And then there's a letter from Donna White, a letter to her daughter who was at a transition point, about to go to college, waiting for that letter of acceptance, wanting so badly to get into this particular school, and it allowed her to talk about all the things in life. There'll be places you don't get into. There'll be things that don't happen for you in the way that you desire, but all of that is part of life. But there'll also be great things that will happen for you. And so I'm actually going to be speaking in Los Angeles this weekend, and one of the sermons I'm going to give is called Strengthened by the Struggle. And the struggles do strengthen us. They don't feel good going through them at all, but certainly when you get to the other side, you realize why you had to go through that.
Absolutely.
And so, so those kinds of things. So faith is the common denominator. And I'm hoping that through faith, we will get through these crises that are happening nationally and now internationally. My generation, we studied abroad, and we had all these experiences, and we could camp out overseas and do all of these things.
Yeah,
now
it's kind of dangerous to do that. Exactly. You're afraid to send your kids to go to do. And I was thinking about students that are studying abroad right now, and I'm sure that must be a struggle for the women here, whose families are overseas, and as well as women who live right here in this country, because they don't know if their son or daughter goes outside to play today, what may happen. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. We're talking about ways that we can come together, particularly as women, to help to heal now that we've gone through such a tough couple of weeks in terms of violence in our country. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Speaking of a woman making a difference, this morning, I was watching CBS this morning, and Gayle King interviewed the young lady who stood in the in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, up against two or three other police officers, and she's in a sundress with no armor or anything, and they're fully engaged in terms of their gear and so forth. And the photo is just striking. I want to play a little excerpt from her interview, and then we'll talk on the other side.
Sure. It was just a lot of nonverbal communication. Sometimes silence speaks volumes. I feel like.
What did you want your silence to say?
I'm human. I'm a woman. I'm a mom. I'm a nurse. I could be your nurse. I could be taking care of you. You know, I'm here. We all matter. We don't have to beg to matter. We do matter. When you see these officers and you see their gear, and I see his gun, they look impenetrable compared to me with no armor in a sundress. But there was no fear.
No fear. The Washington Post says that you captured a critical moment for the country. They're comparing it to past civil rights photos. The takeover in Tiananmen Square in China, where the man staring down the tanks. Civil rights demonstrations in Birmingham, Alabama. They're now putting your photograph, that photograph of you rather, in that category. What does that mean to you?
It means that God has chosen to put me in a position to make a difference, make a change. It is more than me. It is more than myself. So here I am. I have a responsibility to do something.
God has put me in a position to do something else, to do
That's
more.
Powerful.
Very much so. So what is it about women, Ambassador Sujay, that can help make a difference? What can we do as women?
Well, be women, be who we are, because we are the mothers, we are the nurturers, Mother Earth, they talk about. Every life comes through and to us. Whether we're a biological mother or not, we are the figures on earth where we bring comfort and healing and nurture in our natural being. And we bring strength for this young woman to be able to, to say, God has chosen me to do something. Because there are moments that we don't control. And when you tap into the faith, you understand that this moment was created motivated by something stronger, higher than myself. So I think to walk in faith, talk in faith, to live in faith is really important. I know we're interviewing about Soul Sisters, my newest book, and I certainly hope people will get it because it's in the sharing of our stories that I find that healing comes. Like the first book, Sister to Sister, one of the women who was in the book, and these are women who've all touched my life, walked with me. One of the women was my 5th grade teacher, my only black teacher from 1st grade to 11th grade, and she had a son who had been a camp counselor, and on his way back to college, driving back, was killed in a head-on collision. She had not been able to talk about that for 20-some years until she wrote this meditation, this devotion. And as she wrote it, not only was she freed up, but other mothers especially who had children that they lost or losses in their lives read it and they got their freedom. So it's in the sharing of stories that our healing comes. And so that's something that women bring, that we're free to share, we're not ashamed to share. But the other book I really want to share with listeners is called Becoming a Woman of Destiny. And the subtitle is Turning Our Trials into Triumphs. And it talks about, it's based on the biblical Deborah, who was a strong woman. She was a judge, she was a prophetess, she was a wife. So she was a multitasker, as most women are. But the thing that was powerful about her, first of all, was time management, that she made time to spend with God. And that's really important for those of us who are busy leaders, busy bees, to make that time so that you can hear the voice. The second thing that I talk about towards the end of the book is having destiny circles, surrounding yourself with other women who believe in you, who believe in God, who get their strength and their support from one another, so that as you're going through, there are going to be valleys, but you need somebody around you who's on the mountain. There are going to be days you fall off the mountain, and that may not be a valley, but you just fall off, and you need people around you that can help you get back up. And so I often say a winner is just a loser who was able to get back up. And winning women have had losses, have had struggles, but how do we turn those struggles and those trials into triumphs? And I think that's what makes women so special, because we don't stay down and we don't stay down long. But we shake that dust, take a shower, and we're like, okay, I'm back. And, help me to go to my next, whatever that assignment is. And this young woman got hers quite early. She's been destined for something greater than she ever imagined just by her presence in this situation.
So if you had an opportunity to sit down with the women in Alton Sterling's life and Philando Castillo's life, what would you say to them today?
The first thing I would say is I would be a ministry of presence. The first thing is I would not say. I would allow them to cry, to emote however they needed to. I would say, thank you for being brave and strong. I'm sorry that you're going through this. You're not going through this alone. And even though you don't know many of the women and the faces that go with those, know that prayers and strength are coming your way in your behalf from me and from thousands of women like me who want you to know that not only do we love you, but God loves you. And you will not only go through this, but you will get through this. And we will be there for you when you get to the other side.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. Let's go to the phones. Donna joins us from Gloucester. Hi, Donna. You're on the air.
Hi, thank you. I just caught a little bit of the show as I was driving home, so if you've discussed this, just say so. But as a black woman, I haven't had any ugly interaction with police officers. In fact, they've tended to be pretty positive. But I ache for what the young black men and now women are going through with so many of these officers. I am all for lifting up the good ones, but this discrepancy between the way they treat the white criminals who brandish guns and knives and everything, and they practically beg them, put the weapon down, get on the ground. I saw a video where they literally run away, where a black person that they don't even see the weapon, but they say they're scared for their lives and they shoot them dead. That kind of discrepancy. You talk about a broken heart. I feel for these young people and the mothers who are losing their children like this. Did you guys already talk about that?
Yeah, we're in the process of talking about it, and we hear your passion, Donna. We thank you so much for the call. You want to respond, Ambassador?
Well, I haven't had any rough discrepancies either, but I was sharing as a mother of sons. Not only are we prepared for them, but we also know the call is going to come. Whether they have knives and guns or whatever, just driving while black, living while black, walking while black. I have one son who's younger, my youngest son, who's very tall and very built. He's like a young Shaq O'Neal. And, some of his friends in there, he's got a diverse circle of friends, are smaller. And, around 12, I had to have a serious talk with him. Like, you can't just go down the street frolicking like them. And you can't do the things that you think are funny and cute because you will be seen very differently. And so I was sharing earlier that there's the talk, the cry, and the prayer that as black mothers we have. As one who's been in law enforcement, I also do that with and for those who are black and in law enforcement as well, to protect them against not only things that they'll face in the community, but also internally, the racism that they'll face. And so, yeah, we did discuss it a little, but it's disproportionate, and then you go into the penal system, and it's disproportionately black and brown. And so we're in a rough place. But how do you deal with the reality, and how do you get through the reality and make sure that our children are prepared, and it's not just our sons, it's our daughters as well.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with former U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Suzan Johnson Cook, author of Soul Sisters. Robert joins us from Portsmouth. Hi, Robert. You're on the air.
Hey, hello.
Hi.
Just wanted to bring up the point that if you read the Bible, the Holy Bible, the book of Daniel, chapter 2 and verse 43, mentions that people are going to be against each other, just like iron and clay don't mix together. The iron and clay are part of the statue in Daniel's dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, and they're going to mingle together and with the seed of men. And iron does not mix with clay the same way that people that's all in the same nation, when kingdom rise against kingdom, nation rise against nations, then we are not going to get together and be able to come together. And no amount of rhetoric is going to bring us together. So what women can do nowadays is just try to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ, because we are in deep trouble, because the prophecy says that we must get where we are now. And so we are not going to have no easier time. We are in the great tribulation. We are about 6 months into it, and it's just going to get worse and worse and worse.
Okay, thank you so much for your call, Robert. We appreciate your thoughts. Ambassador Sujay, I'll let you take that.
No, I mean, certainly the Bible is the document that I live by, and the Word, I'm still a minister and a preacher and, use it. And certainly there are going to be times that we don't get along, but the responsibility of law enforcement and others is to make sure that there's protection so that people don't just randomly, hurt one another. There are rules in every society, and there's policies in every society that we want to make sure that government and law enforcement protect our people.
Absolutely. So tell us about some of the women who are in the book, who shared their personal stories. Do you have any favorites?
Well, Donna White's her letter to her daughters. Phyllis Porcher, who talks about loss. She was 14 and lost her mother, and by 20 lost her father. So to be a young teenager that grew up, parentless and not able to share the pain, not knowing where you could share the pain. And so this was the first time, she's in her 40s now, first time that she was able to share her story, and the freedom that happened for her, the breakthrough that happened for her, and for others who knew her and did not realize how much pain she was going through, was tremendous. And then there's another woman who's a contributor, Kim Hill, who also talked about loss of her parents as an adult just very recently. Turns out they live in the same building and the same complex.
Wow.
Did not know each other, but those are the kind of connections that happen, divine connections. So we had 2 book signings, one in New York and one in Washington, and so they met at the New York one, and it's like, OMG. So now you have 2 soul sisters who are really connected at the soul, who are going to become friends because of their loss experience. So those are the kinds of things that happen. In Washington, very similar experiences, people who wrote about loss or about aging. We have one who's Mercedes Nesfield, who's 80, so will be 83 in October. If you saw her, she looks like a 53, 63-year-old woman in shape. And so because I had everyone who was present. We had 12 present at Washington and 15 of the authors present at the New York one. And I had them read their own work. So, number one, it was the first time many of them were ever published. Number 2, nobody can tell your story like you can tell your story. So to see this 83-year-old woman who's got pizzazz and personality and all of the P's and charisma just wowed the whole room. And so people were like, you know what, I'm going to take care of myself. If that's what 83 looks like, baby, I'm going to get there. So those kinds of stories, so it wasn't all about gloom and doom, but it also was about, look, this is what life handed me, and this is how I've handled life. And so women, you can make a choice to live healthy, and you can live a choice to live with and have sister friends. So one of the things that came out of the book was that we do have sister circles. They're like the destiny circles I just described. And it's a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon. We call it Sisters with Sujay on a Saturday. And for many women leaders, we don't get a chance to wear jeans in our normal day. We really can't outside of our house at all, whether it's a church day or not. And so we have everybody bring potluck. They come and they share their story in a circle with no judgment, with no, having to be a certain way. And so we share. And so friendships are developing with people who didn't know each other before literary, contribution, but now they're sisters in the real sense, soul sisters because of their faith, soul sisters because of their authorship, co-authorship, and soul sisters because they have a place to come and be the very women that we need to be so we can go out back into the world and do the things that we've been called to do, like that young lady, because no one knows when the day is going to come or the assignment's going to come. The places that I've been invited into, the White House twice, the two presidents of the United States, coming from a walk-up tenement in Harlem. My parents could have never imagined that. But then you get this call, can you come to the White House and can you serve as a U.S. ambassador? And you're like, OMG.
Yeah, tell us about that. How did that happen? Because I found that really fascinating based on everything else that you were doing prior to your ambassadorship.
Well, I was with Secretary Clinton a few weeks ago, and she, was on off the record, of course, conversation, but we were with the BET Leading Women Conference, and she said, oh, my gosh, is that Suzan Johnson? She said she came up through the faith community, and, she worked with my husband, President Clinton, and it was because of my faith that he was attracted to the work I was doing. I came in as a White House Fellow in 93, 94, which is a wonderful program for young leaders between like 25 and 33 who've accomplished some things that they're not set yet. And so I implore people to go whitehouse.gov to the website and look at the White House Fellows application. It's life-changing. It was created by President Lyndon Johnson 53 years ago, and it's a nonpartisan fellowship where for a year you work in Washington if you're selected. So it's about 2,000 people apply, and they whittle it down to 14 to 17 fellows.
Wow.
So the particular year that I was selected, was President Clinton's second year as president. And then you have to, even once you're selected, you have to go around to all the agencies and interview, like, which one's going to be the best fit for you, because you're guaranteed to work with either the president, the vice president, or one of the cabinet secretaries. So you actually go to talk to either them, like Ron Brown was Commerce Secretary at the time, and I met with him personally. With President Clinton at the White House, I met with his domestic policy advisor. So I was prepared to talk about all this government stuff. At the time, it was NAFTA and healthcare reform and, the first round of healthcare reform.
Right.
And I was prepared to talk about all of that, when I was going around for my interviews. Every single one talked about faith. Oh, I heard that you're the Baptist preacher. I heard that you wrote this book for women in ministry. I always wanted to be a minister. We have this Bible study on Wednesday nights. I will hope that you could come. Even the Secret Service, if you might be available when we're off sometimes, we'd love to talk to you about faith. And so I ended up getting 7 offers. I went to 7 interviews. I got 7 offers.
How old were you?
I was 33.
Wow, that's awesome.
I had just gotten married, had a 9-month-old baby. And was selected. So, my world was like, oh. But it was so exciting and so exhilarating. And I got to spend a year with President Clinton. So I went for domestic policy to be a domestic policy advisor. But he was so into the black church at that time that I ended up writing speeches for him. He would send his speeches over and say, we want to make sure that, my protocol is correct and, all of those things. He was going to different conferences. And then, so I ended up being a speechwriter. Then he would say, I can't make it to this particular convention because I'm at this conference, so can you go represent me? What? Can I? What? Where's my ticket? So I ended up going to all these places as a faith leader who worked at the White House. And it really was the first faith-based initiative. We didn't call it that then because we didn't have that name. But he allowed me to represent him all over this country as a faith leader who worked at the White House. And then fast forward, he kept me on 3 more years with HUD, and we did develop really the first faith-based initiatives. Henry Cisneros was the secretary then, and he had just come back from Harvard Divinity School making a speech where I had just taught the year prior to coming to the White House. He says, I need someone who knows government and who knows the faith community. Can you stay? And I'm like, can I? So I ended up being at HUD for 3 years, came back home pastoring a church, and then the last 2 years, President Clinton established what's called the President's Initiative on Race, which is where we are right now. And his thing was, can we be one America? That was the question. And it was called the One America Initiative. And John Hope Franklin, the late John Hope Franklin, and 6 others, including myself, were tasked with being advisors to the president on race in America because he saw the changing hand. He saw that it wasn't just black and white, north and south, but that we had to be ready for the Latinization of America, and that people of color were going to be the majority. And so we were talking about it then. So I ended up being his faith advisor. So I ended up going for what was a 1-year fellowship. Ended up staying 6 years at the White House.
That is fantastic. But I have a question for you then. So since you were a part of his race initiative, what do you notice between then and now? Because right now, today, it feels like it's getting worse. But you have a broader perspective. So I'm curious as to where you think the country's going. Are we going in the right direction or not?
We're not. I mean, his initiative didn't get a whole lot of play. And it should have. We lifted up models where things were working, like in California, where there were, and the faith community was a big part of the places where it was working, where there were churches, church leaders who are all retired now, but where they were bringing together multi-ethnic initiatives, and they were working through. They were doing race roundtables, just like what we saw on CNN the other night. They were doing that 22 years ago, and it really didn't get the kind of attention and play because they were like, this isn't the right time for a president to be dealing with race, and it was kind of race was swept under the rug. But those who are from a minority community, a person of color, we know that these issues, you may think they're dormant, but they don't die. Right. And so we're just seeing kind of the explosion, the eruption of it, like a volcano. You see the lava there, and you know that it's calm today. But at some point, it's going to erupt, and that's really what we're seeing today. So race relations are not better. And Trump and his camp are inciting the flames. It may have been lava that was just kind of lying there, but now he's just striking a match to it.
Do you think that it's Trump necessarily, or did it really start back at the beginning of the Obama administration in terms of how we treat, in terms of how we've been treating the office of the president?
Oh, well, now, certainly it's been horrible. And having been in his administration, when they talk about systemic racism, it means when they can't get to him, they'll do anything they can to anybody he's put in. So I experienced it at high levels, believe me. The daggers, they didn't even just say it's in your heart. They turned it, to make sure that you would bleed. And I'm like, I'm a U.S. ambassador, but that didn't keep you from, if it didn't keep the president from it, it's not going to keep you. So it didn't start there. I think what Trump is doing is that there have been people who've wanted to say some things, and they couldn't. They couldn't get to the president because they were not close to him. And so what Trump is doing is allowing all the people who've been laying in the wings to say, okay, it's our time to take center stage. And so his striking the match is just allowing the flame to burn. But certainly we've seen the most disrespect of a U.S. president ever in the history of the United States, and we know it is because of his race. But I will tell you, having been up close and been in his administration, he handled it well. And having his family intact, having Michelle Obama next to him, having his family together when he came into the White House, and no scandal and no controversy helps him. He will go down in history, and it'll happen after he gets out the White House, unfortunately, but he will go down in history as being one of the greatest presidents ever. And one of the things he's done is that he's made sure that there are people of color deeply ingrained and rooted in government at senior levels. So it will take years to try to undo. And so even though those persons, including myself, who had to endure the struggle, it is strengthening our position in the long run in terms of definitely having people of color. So no matter who's elected president, you can't undo years and years. You can't go all the way down to the deputy secretary. You can't take out everybody, So that's one thing that I was really pleased to see up close and personal, and to be honored to have the privilege to serve him. I didn't want anything to be wrong in the area that I was responsible for. So, they say stay in your lane. Well, I stayed in my lane, and I made sure I drove correctly, because I wanted to hold up his arms so that the one area of government he didn't have to worry about was international religious freedom. There was going to be someone there who had his back who was going to give it 200% for the time I was there. And so that was the kind of assignment I felt.
So when you were traveling, around the world, and you're talking, I assume, with religious leaders from everywhere, from all different types of faiths and so forth, what was your read on where we are as a global society in terms of religion, race, and how we deal with each other as human beings?
Well, you know, on the international level, as a diplomat, it was government to government most of the time. There would be some sidebars with religious leaders, but certainly at the State Department, we have religious leaders at roundtables like every week. So, you know, who represented certainly nations. But usually when I was traveling around the world, it was government to government in terms of how are you handling religious freedom? How are you dealing with the United Declaration of Human Rights? All of the things that you were agreed to, are you adhering to? So that was really my role as a diplomat, to have that conversation in behalf of the President and the Secretary of State, and then bring that information back to them. So I advised them. And so as President and Secretary, they were the principals. And that's one of the things you got to learn certainly when you've been a black pastor, you know, where you kind of basically, you know, you have people around, you have deacons and trustees, but they rely on you a lot to say, which way is this ship going?
Which way is it going, right.
Yeah. So you're the principal, but when you're in government and you're working for the president, no, he's the principal. So you're there in his behalf. What is it he wants accomplished on this trip? But the state of international relations in general, women are still kept. Most women were not at the table. Many rooms, I was the only woman in the room. And if there were women, they sat in the circle around the table, not directly at the table, behind the table. And so, you know, many times they had to wear their religious attire or their head attire, and you could see their eyes. I always remember these eyes in Saudi Arabia every time we talk about this. And I remember this woman looking at me longingly, like, can you speak for us? And so afterwards, she snuck a card to me, you know, because she had been Western trained. But when you go back, of course, you have to adhere to whatever the structure and the policies and the rules are of your country. And it was just like, can you get a word in for us, for women? And so I felt the double responsibility, not just representing the United States of America, but certainly representing women. And so race, in terms of being black or white, wasn't the largest issue. It was mainly gender and religion, you know, and certainly you come home and you deal with race every day.
Exactly.
But those were the two priorities and the two representations, I said, more than anything.
So we've got about 2 minutes left, and I would love for you to, in these last few minutes, to give us a word of encouragement as we work our way through this, where we are in the United States today.
Well, my quick one is please get Soul Sisters and please get Becoming a Woman of Destiny. You can go on Amazon, any of the engines, and get that by Suzan Johnson Cook, and it's Susan with a Z, so you remember me, Suzan Johnson Cook. So I hope that it'll bring inspiration to you as it has brought to me and so many others. My word for our nation today is what our president said. Basically, he asked the question, can we work with one heart? And I will answer the question, yes, we can. And we all have to be deputized to be bridge builders and heart builders, that we have to put down our differences and we have to come to the table. No matter who hurt us, no matter what they did, this is the first day of the rest of our life. And this nation has a choice to make. We have to will it, as he used that word. We have to will it that we want to come together. I believe that's the will of this nation, and so we must do whatever is in our means to make that happen. So I will do my part. I encourage you to do your part. Whether you get called by CNN or not, you can be in the background, and many times the background is the best place to make sure that the foreground shines the way it needs to. Let's will it so to be one America. Let's work so that we can come together and be one heart, one people, one nation, indivisible under God.
That is fantastic. It has been truly a pleasure talking with you today. I want to read very quickly one poem that is in your book. It's from Dr. Teresa Delgado.
Oh, yes.
And I want to read that before we end. And she says, in this moment of endless sorrow, in our grief and mourning too deep for words, we invoke the one who in the beginning spoke the word and was the word who was made flesh, the word whose flesh was beaten and bloodied, violated and torn. The word was broken, yet the word was spoken. Silence the clamor, to hear the silenced into speech. To speak a word, to tell a story of stories of the children who are no more. Open our ears to the words of brokenness, the words of suffering, the words of hope. Give us the tears to cry, tears of anger, of rage, of defiance, tears of healing. Embolden us with the courage to act in the world, to work for justice, to speak the broken word out of broken flesh. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh, and the Word in flesh is all we have, and you have taught us it is all we need to heal our broken world. Thank you so very much, Ambassador Suzan Johnson Cook, for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and we will be right back.
Hi, this is Essie Patha-Murkerson from Law and Order. You are listening to Another View at 89.5 WHRV.
And Victor, thank you so much, because you know that's my favorite of all of the transition music that we have, and especially since Lisa Godley is making me read this next story. But in less than 2 weeks, all 32 NFL teams will be in training camp, gearing up for the 2016 season. Among them, the Pittsburgh Steelers, headed up by none other than Hampton Roads' own Mike Tomlin. Our Lisa Godley got a chance to talk to Tomlin about his team, the lessons he's learned, the ones he tries to teach, and the reason he's made it a priority to be here in Hampton Roads every summer for the past 8 years.
Yes, it's getting close. The NFL season is right around the corner, and like all NFL coaches, Pittsburgh Steelers coach Mike Tomlin has his sights set on one thing in particular.
My intentions are always the same. I think we got a good football team. It's our job to compete for and win a world championship for the Steelers and Steeler Nation this year.
This will be Tomlin's 10th season as the Steelers head coach. During his time in Pittsburgh, Mike has led his team to 4 AFC North titles, guided them to the playoffs 5 times, and to the Super Bowl twice. The Hampton Roads native also holds the title of the youngest head coach to win a Super Bowl, the Steelers beating the Arizona Cardinals in Super Bowl 43 when Mike Tomlin was 36 years old.
Coach Tomlin is ready to win.
Over the years, the William & Mary grad says he's learned a lot of lessons. The biggest one?
To listen. I'm continually working to get better at what I do, and thankfully I'm going into my 10th year now, and I don't take that for granted, but the longer I do it, I think the more I'm cognizant of what's going on around me and listening and taking information in an effort to get better. Yes, I'm in a position of leadership, and yes, that's a lonely position at times, but there's a lot of information at your disposal as a leader if you open your mind, your ears, and your heart to it, and I try to do that. I try to listen as much as I can in terms of gathering information that helps me make the decisions that are best for us.
One such decision came a few months ago when it was time for the NFL Draft.
With the 25th pick in the 2016 NFL Draft, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Artie Burns, defensive back, Miami.
More than anything, his draft status is his draft status. We all know the expectations that come with that. I just want to see day-to-day work habits to match. His talents are his talents, and he's got enough. Right now, we're just building a foundation for his career in terms of the mentality that he brings to his work daily. And he's done a great job of it thus far. And if he continues to let that be the focus, the play will usually reflect that. He's going to be a great player.
At 21, Burns comes to Steeler Nation with a lot on his plate. He lost his mom to a heart attack in October of last year. And with his father in prison, he now has custody of his 2 younger brothers and, along with his girlfriend, is raising his 1-year-old son.
I don't run away from those stories. I generally gravitate toward those stories because life's trials harden you, and there's growth there. Usually the guys that's been through some of the things that he's been through, football challenges are just that. The football challenges, they have a good perspective on the challenges that the game presents, and it's never too big for him. And thus far, he's kind of displayed that mentality, and it's going to be an asset to him.
Life's lessons are very important to Mike Tomlin. That's why he makes it a point every summer to come back and be a part of the Hampton Roads Youth Foundation's annual football camp. He says, as far as the camp goes, football is just the hook.
But it's not a football camp. It's a life camp. You know, hopefully we get an opportunity to use the game of football to talk a lot about challenges and goal setting and things that are important for these young people to grow as members of this community and members of their family, to be the people that they desire to be, and we need them to be. I've been so blessed by so many people and opportunities. People took my hopes and dreams personally and it helped me along the way, and I in turn feel like it's my job to pass it forward.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
So those of you who know me know that I am an avid Ravens fan, but I hope that Bert Schmidt, our president and CEO, and Barbara Sierra, my very dear friend, are happy because they are uber Pittsburgh Steelers fans. So there you go. There's lots of great things going on this weekend, including the 34th annual Norfolk Waterfront Jazz Festival, featuring Brian Culbertson, Gerald Albright, Jonathan Butler, Jeff Lorber, Everett Harp, and Chuck Loeb. Now, the festival is tonight and Saturday from 5 until 11 p.m., and we just got this notice in. Tonight's concert has been moved to Scope. Because of the excessive heat and forecasted rain for this evening, tonight's Jazz Festival concert has been moved to Scope. So just take your tickets over to the Scope and you may enjoy the concert inside. If you have any questions, you can dial 441-2345. That's 441-2345. And we hope that something we've said today has given you hope and strength to keep pushing forward in the face of adversity. If you'd like to hear the show again or share it with a friend, visit our website, anotherviewradio.org, and download the podcast. And you can carry Another View with you everywhere on your smartphone or tablet. Simply download the free WHRO media app. Next week, cardiologist Dr. Keith Newby will be here to answer your health questions. It's Another View on Health. And a reminder again to watch America in Black and Blue, a PBS NewsHour weekend special, an in-depth look at the relationship between police and the African American community. That's tonight at 9 on WHRO TV 15. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Victor Bowen is our audio engineer, and Taylor White answered our phones. I'm Barbara Hamley. Make it a wonderful weekend, everyone. And let's get together again next Friday at noon for Another View.